If you're using ChatGPT in the browser, you're using it.
Carl Vellotti is the full stack PM.
He knows more about coding CLIs than most PMs do about PRDs.
And in today's episode, he's giving you a complete guide to how PMs should be using OpenAI's new Codex.
Codex is the most powerful way for product managers to build prototypes, but only if you know how to set it up correctly.
People are saying Codex alone justifies OpenAI's $500 billion valuation. Should you try Sam Altman's new Claude Code competitor? That's what we unpack today. We do a live demo of Codex for non-technical people so you can get the most out of it. How can a non-technical person ramp up on Codex?
As long as you follow these steps and you're really willing to put in that work up front, it can be one of the best ways to prototype that exists right now in 2025. And normally, like if you ask GPT in the browser, like, hey, here's this video, give me the transcript, it wouldn't be able to do it. It doesn't have the tools.
How should you be using Codex? How does Codex compare to Claude Code? What are the power user functionalities to get the most out of its prototyping and coding capabilities? That's today's episode. Really quickly, I think a crazy stat is that more than 50% of you listening are not subscribed. If you can subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple or Spotify podcasts, my commitment to you is that we'll continue to make this content better and better. And now on to today's episode. Carl, welcome back to the podcast.
I am so excited to be back. Our last episode on Claude Code was so fun, and I'm really excited to cover Codex.
Yes, past Marty Kagan in less than a week. Amazing episode. How can a non-technical person ramp up on Codex?
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and get started here. Okay, so to get started with downloading Codex, you just go to this developers.openai.com/codex/CLI. So today what we're going to be using is we're going to be using Codex from the terminal. If you've never done anything in the terminal, I promise that it's going to be a lot easier than it sounds. Just the very first things you do have to set up directly from the command line. Okay, so on this website, it kind of just gives you the exact commands that you need. So you do need something called npm, but you just type npm install, and then you just use this exact command. And when we put that into the terminal, it'll go ahead and install Codex. So I'm going to copy this, and then...
And for people who don't know, that's a package manager for Node.js JavaScript, just because we want you to also understand what you're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of is just you'll use NPM for many different things that you're doing from the web, and this is just another one. So we're going to go ahead and copy this into our terminal. If you're on a Mac or Windows, it'll be the same. And what this will do is it will go in and it will just install Codex for us. It's very quick. Okay, so for me, I had it already installed, so it just added one thing. But if you don't have it installed, you just run this one command and you'll be good to go. And then once you have it installed, all you do is, we're still in the terminal here, you just type Codex. And now we see this interface and we are all of a sudden, we are in Codex. Now we've done the only commands in the terminal you're ever going to have to do at this point. In the future, all you ever have to do is open up the terminal and then type Codex, because now we are officially in ChatGPT Codex. So just type hi. And now here we are. So just if you've used ChatGPT on the browser, that's all that's happening here, is we're just talking to ChatGPT. Let's get acquainted with a couple of the commands. So the first one to know is there is one just model, so we can see what model of ChatGPT are we using. So there's two main options. We can either just use ChatGPT 5, which is what you're probably most used to, or we can turn on GPT-5 Codex. This is kind of an important first thing to know. Even though the tool itself is called Codex, there's also a model that's called GPT-5 Codex. This one is really specifically built for coding, and we are going to cover it later, but it's not great at other tasks where just regular base GPT-5 works the best. So we'll come back to GPT-5 Codex, but for now, for most of this walkthrough, we're just going to use regular GPT-5. So we're not going to use GPT-5 Codex. We're just going to use GPT-5. And then once you select it, there's a couple options. Basically, what thinking level do you want GPT-5 to have? This is something that I think a lot of people give OpenAI flack for, just because there's so many options. But for this tutorial, we're just going to use medium. That's what I've used to do all the work that we are going to demo here. It's a good model because it will intelligently use more thinking power if it needs it, or if it's a quick task, it'll just do it quickly. If you really feel like you have a task that it's not spending enough time on, you can switch to high, but medium works pretty well. And then the other commands that are good to know, if you ever want to just start a completely new chat, you just do /new, and then that'll start a new chat. If you have having a long conversation with GPT-5 and you're getting low on your context window, which you can see here, it tells you how much context you have left. Then instead of doing new, you can do a command called compact, which will basically have GPT-5 just summarize where you're at in the conversation, but in a much shorter way. And then you can continue from there.
Very cool.
Cool. Okay, so for this demo, what we're going to use today is I have a bunch of files prepared, and I'll make these available. We have a bunch of files that are kind of like as if you were working at a real company. So the demo company here is called TaskFlow. It's a sort of Jira Asana competitor. So pretty generic, but it'll give you the idea. And then what we have here in the files is we have some data. So we have like user interviews, and then we have some docs like PRDs. So we'll be referencing these sort of throughout the entire podcast. We have this folder, which is where everything is. So we're going to go ahead and open a new terminal at that folder and then do. Okay, so now we have folder open here and we can get started. So I'm using a tool called WhisperFlow, which I highly recommend. It lets you just sort of talk to your computer and it will transcribe. And so that's, if you see text just appear, it's either probably because of that. So let's try it. Please tell me what user interviews we have completed. So now ChatGPT is going to start searching our code base, or our whole entire folder, which isn't really code right now. It's just text documents. And we can see it exploring, listing out the files.
This is the real power of a CLI way to access ChatGPT or Claude for that matter with Codex or Claude Code, because you're giving it all the context of this folder. It's a lot easier than setting it up on the web.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to provide these files. We're already in the place where those files are, and we can just have it look for them. So right now you can so it did it. So it was able to list, search, and then read. And then it's telling us that we have these 3 interviews that were completed. Okay, so now what we can do is it's actually already kind of predicting what we would want. Do you want a quick synthesis of the common pain points? So let's say, yes, please put together the top 3 pain points across all 3 interviews. Okay, so it really tells us like exactly what it's doing. So it's summarizing, and now here we go. So the top pain points were voice input reliability, integrations, and then template workflow. So now we can kind of already start to see like how it is able to use this information. And then if we wanted, so right now we've seen it search for files and then read and summarize them. You can also create files. Please go ahead and create a single document that outlines all of these pain points along with direct customer quotes. So now what it will do is it's already done some of this analysis, so I'm guessing this will be quicker than the first time I had to read it, but it will actually put together a new document for us. And then we can do interesting things like have it pull in those actual customer quotes into that document.
Very interesting.
Planning, document creation, simplifying. So we can also just kind of look at the UI here. So it tells us how much context we have left. So we haven't really done much. So it still has 100%. GPT-5 has a pretty large context window. There's a lot of jokes around what context window really means. I think one of the biggest jokes is that a 200,000 token context window and a million token context window are the same because the way that AI uses it. But I will say that GPT-5, it feels like it uses its context window pretty well. It fills up very slowly, so you can really go pretty far before it starts to like forget everything.
Awesome. The right place to handle like a whole folder full of all your meeting notes, all of your performance feedback, all of your goals, strategy docs, PRDs, future results write-ups, so that you have like a really nice context window.
Yeah, 100%. And for the tasks that we're looking at here, like classic PM tasks that are more like document-based and not too much code-based, it is just, can really easily handle that stuff. It's really when you start doing stuff with like lots of code and logs that will fill up, but we'll be able to go very far before we have to clear it. So this is just basically it sort of showing all the diff for this folder that it just created. Okay, so now it's telling us that we has created this in data, user interviews, pain point summary, and it's telling us the contents. But the question right now that you probably have is, well, where can we actually see this? So if we go into that folder that we had open before, then we go into data and we go into, where did it put it? It said it put it in user interviews. And now we see this new file, but we can't really just easily open it from here. So now is where we're gonna switch, we're gonna leave the terminal and we're gonna go ahead and go into an IDE. So that's an integrated development environment. And so my favorite to use is Cursor because I also use it for other types of prototyping. And even if you don't pay for Cursor, you can still use the IDE and it's pretty nice. So we're gonna go ahead and close this terminal, but we will resume it soon. So I'm gonna open up Cursor here.
Which is itself a fork of VS Code, so it inherited all the goodness that VS Code had built up over the years.
Yep. And if you want to use VS Code, you can also use that one, of course. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open We'll do a new window here, and then we will go ahead and open. So this folder is the Codex PM demo. So we're going to open that folder. And what we can see right away, and I'll just go ahead and full screen, is we can see that, okay, we go into data, we go into user interviews, and now we have that pain point summary, and we can just view it directly in the terminal here. So this is pretty nice. And then within this, of course, this is just like raw markdown, but you can always just right click and then go to preview, open preview, and then you can see it very, very nicely formatted. So here's the output. Yeah, it's very nice. And then you can double click on any of these and it will take you to that area so you can edit. But yeah, so let's just quickly look at what GPT-5 produced here. So we had it look at those interviews and then open this. And now we have pretty good. It's telling us the main pain points that it had from before with a summary. And then it's also giving us direct quotes from those user interviews.
Today's episode is brought to you by Jira Product Discovery. If you're like most product managers, you're probably in Jira, tracking tickets and managing the backlog. But what about everything that happens before delivery? Jira Product Discovery helps you move your discovery, prioritization, and even road mapping work out of spreadsheets and into a purpose-built tool designed for product teams. Capture insights, prioritize what matters, and create roadmaps you can easily tailor for any audience. And because it's built to work with Jira, everything stays connected from idea to delivery. Used by product teams at Canva, Deliveroo, and even The Economist. Check out why and try it for free today at Atlassian.com/product-discovery. That's Atlassian.com/product-discovery. Jira Product Discovery. Build the right thing. Trust isn't just earned, it's demanded. Whether you're a startup founder navigating your first audit or a seasoned professional scaling your GRC program, proving your commitment to security has never been more critical or more complex. That's where Vanta comes in. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. Centralized security workflows, complete questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Vanta can help you start or scale your security program by connecting you with auditors and experts to conduct your audit and set up your security program quickly. Plus, with automation and AI throughout the platform, Vanta gives you time back, so you can focus on building your company. Join over 9,000 global companies like Atlassian, Quora, and Factory who use Vanta to manage risk and improve security in real time. For a limited time, my listeners get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/Aakash. That's VANTA.com/AAKASH for $1,000 off.
You did a pretty good job given that we had a pretty simple prompt.
Yeah, that is a good point, and that's something that we'll look at in a second. So now that we're in Cursor, we can open up a terminal in Cursor. So the command is control backtick. And then we're here, and then remember to start Codex, we just type Codex. And so now we're the exact same thing that we had open from before, but just now we're in it sort of with the files themselves. So this is definitely, if you're going to be working with one of these CLI tools, just open it up in an IDE, because that's the easiest way for you to both do it and then also see like what it's actually doing as it works. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've seen it be able to search for files, we've seen it read files, we've seen it create files. Another thing that you can do with Codex is you can have it search the web. So let's say we want to search the difference between Claude Code and Codex and have it do a summary for us. So we will just put that in. So please go ahead and summarize the differences between feature, pricing, ease of use. So it can also search the web, and it's pretty good at it. But we're going to see one of the first sort of limitations of Codex as it starts to do this work. One difference between Claude Code that's kind of interesting is, so it tells you that it's working, and then as it does stuff, it'll tell you what it's doing. But right away, it'll start to ask for permissions. So it's like, okay, can I do this search? And we'll say yes.
And I think Claude Code was showing you like how much you were spending, right? That doesn't do that here.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not actually showing us the number of tokens it's using. All it tells us is the context. So, okay. So one thing about Codex is that it will keep asking, like every new website that it finds, it wants to run a command so that it can like view what's on that website. But it will ask for every single one. Even though I'm saying you don't need to ask again, because it's doing new commands, it keeps asking me. Versus on Claude Code, when you do it on Claude Code. So one thing that might be interesting while it's working here is we can actually also run this in Claude Code.
I love this. Let's put them head to head.
Okay, so we have Codex running here, and then let's go ahead and get Claude Code running here. So I have Claude on my computer as well, so I'm just typing Claude. And now we have it open. So let's give it the exact same prompt. So we're saying search the web to summarize the differences between the two.
Claude Code is smooshing.
Yeah, so it's smooshing. This one, ChatGPT is working, and this one is smooshing. And so we see it like right away. It's doing like one thing that we're immediately seeing is that Claude was able to run 3 separate web searches at the same time. And this is not exactly its sub-agents feature, but it is kind of like working in parallel. Whereas Codex is, doing one at a time, and it's asking for permissions for every single one.
Seems like they need to dog food their own product a little more over there.
Yeah, so, okay, so it's going to keep asking. So this is going to take a really long time. So what I will show is my first sort of pro tip for Codex is so we're just going to exit, and we're going to run Codex again, but this time there's 2 options. So one command we didn't look at before is called approvals. And so this is where, right now we're in auto, where it is asking whenever it wants to run a command or make edits. We can put it on full access mode. And the first time you turn this on, it'll kind of give you a warning, like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Because it gives Codex the power to just like kind of keep running commands. My advice, and I know someone's going to do this, and it might mess someone's up computer, but I think if you do it, as long as you're doing like normal stuff that's not sort of like interacting, with like some sort of base level of your computer, it's pretty unlikely you're going to have any problems. And this really helps you avoid just the frustration. And there's like lots of memes about this where you run Codex and you give it this long task and it gets started, and then you go to do something else and you come back and it's just needs permission for some like small command. And so if you run it with this full access mode, then it will just keep going, and it's much faster.
Yep. And
it
hasn't broken your computer so far.
I haven't broken my computer. So we're in this directory, so it won't leave this directory. So we're not really doing anything that's too risky. So
okay.
That is a disclaimer, is that if that happens to you, I'm really sorry, but I that's how I use it. So, and then one thing that's funny is you can do Codex, and then you can do YOLO, and then that will automatically launch it into this mode where it won't ask for any permissions.
Best hack ever. Codex YOLO, guys.
Yeah, we're in YOLO. The same version, or the version of that exists in Claude Code is -- dangerously skip permissions, which I also use in Claude Code. Because it's just really, it really feels magic when it can just keep doing things and doesn't have to ask you for permission, versus when you need to keep giving it permission. So, okay, so Claude Code finished its answer over here pretty quickly. And even though we weren't in that YOLO mode, it didn't ask for any permissions because it's just doing web searches. And then Codex is working over here. And then, so looking at this UI, it actually tells us, like, exploring GitHub API access, and tells you exactly what it's doing. And is exposing, if you saw what Claude Code did, it kind of just ran, we'll even just run it again, just to show it while Codex is going. Let's do the same one. So we're going to do dangerously skip permissions. So that puts it in this mode of basically YOLO mode. So let's just run the same command while Codex is running so we can see the differences.
Is Claude Code generally faster, or is it just on this query?
It's generally a bit faster. And so that's one thing with I think with Codex is it's just a bit slower for stuff. Even though it also has like a different approach where it's like searching one website at a time. Whereas with Claude Code, what we see is that it's doing 3 at once, and it's just exposing a lot less information. In Claude Code, it's sort of showing us like the exact command and like what it's getting back, whereas Claude Code's kind of hiding more of that. And I think we're already kind of starting to see some of the differences in the design philosophy between these two products, where, this one's mustering, and then this one tells you it's looking for pricing info. So Claude Code, I think, kind of tries to just do the right things in like a nicer, simpler interface. And Codex really wants to show you every single thing that you're doing. And I think that's kind of like the engineer first, I think, is more on the Codex side, whereas maybe for product management work or document work, Claude Code is like hides a bit more of it, but still does it well.
It's almost like Apple versus Microsoft in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Okay, so Claude Code finished, and I think we had started it after Codex, so it's still working here, but we'll let it come up with its answer. We can, one thing that you can always do, and as you start to use these tools, that becomes a bit exhausting, but very fun, is while one is running, if it's working on a task, you can always just run another one. So we're just gonna open another Codex in YOLO mode, and then while this first Codex is figuring that out, we can just keep going into a completely new instance of Codex over here.
Yep. And you did some tab management there where you linked those two terminal windows. How did you do that?
Yeah, great question. So all I did is you can just right click and then you can go ahead and split terminal, and then that lets you have two terminals next to each other. Or in easier ways, you can just drag terminals to wherever you want them to go.
Nice.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is we're kind of just doing like a general overview here. So you can also have GPT just view images. So I have this image I created for LinkedIn, just sort of like how technical do you need to be to use these AI tools. So we'll just go ahead and screenshot that and then paste it in. So as you would expect.
Infographic.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. And then, okay, one thing that's good to know is that because I think all CLI tools have to have consistency across Mac and Windows in terms of their commands, Command V, which normally pastes on a Mac, doesn't work. You have to do Control V like you would do on a Windows computer. So it pasted it here. It kind of just shows us that it came from the clipboard and the dimensions. Please give me feedback on this image. How could it be more clear? And so you can paste any kind of images in here, multiple images. It's really helpful for like error messages, or if you're trying to prototype something and the UI isn't right, or you just want to improve something, you can give it images, and it won't display those images here, but you can sort of trust that it does have them. Claude Code's implementation is slightly different, where when you paste an image, it just says the image. So again, we're kind of seeing it in like another way where Claude it just says, just trust me, like I got it right. Whereas with Codex, it will say, just give you more information. Like here's where it came from, and then here are the dimensions. So just very, very different design philosophies for sure.
Mm-hmm. How would you contrast and compare the models themselves at document writing and coding? Like what would be the scores for each?
Yeah, so this is actually a good example for what we just did. So let's look at our question we asked it to compare Codex and Claude Code. We asked them each to do that. And so what we can look at is their actual answers here. So Claude Code is like a bit more formatted. So like we get these like tags at the beginning of these different sections, and it sort of really got that we asked for this to be for product managers. And so it's asking for it for product managers. And so kind of giving us what's the difference for PMs, what's the pricing, ease of use, best use cases for PMs. And then let's look at Codex. So it sort of tells you, their high level overview of features. It does also have pricing, also has ease of use, also has best use case for PMs and quick guidance. So I think in terms of like how they actually write documents, I like the way Claude writes in general a bit more, but I think they're both like we didn't really give a lot of guidance and had pretty similar answers. And you can see that Codex is just a bit more straightforward. Like if you ask for something, it will just give you that. And it doesn't even sort of have like the pre-tags to these different sections. It just bullet points out the answers. Whereas Claude will kind of try to format it a bit more nicely based on what you might want. And so that's really like the difference. So it really depends what you want. And I would say if you know exactly what you want and you want it to follow like a specific format, then Codex is probably a bit better. But if you want it to make some decisions because you're not exactly sure how you want something to be done, then that's where Claude will try to guess, and it's pretty good at guessing.
I like that differentiation.
And so that's also very interesting for coding, right? Because for coding, if you are an engineer and you know exactly how you want something to be built, then that's why a lot of engineers really love Codex, because it just follows the rules exactly. Whereas Claude it'll do what you say, but it will also like usually do some extra stuff. Like it will create extra documentation without you asking. It'll add more comments without you asking. So if you know exactly what you want, Codex is great. But if you want it to do a little bit of the thinking for you, then I think that's where Claude Code shines.
Makes sense. And when Sahil Livingia demoed Codex on the podcast, we found that it's very industrious, which I think we're seeing here as well. It works for like 2 minutes, 30 seconds. It'll go off and do stuff versus the ChatGPT in the browser most people are familiar with. Unless you have that thinking time, you're not going to get that extended reasoning. And even then, it's usually not going for quite as long as it seems like the CLI version would go.
Oh yeah, 100%. One thing with the CLI is you can give it, very long running tasks and it will just keep going. Whereas if you're using it in the browser, if you do deep research, it'll do something more, but it mostly will just, it'll just try to answer your question in, under a minute without really like doing a lot of stuff. Whereas because we're in the, we're in the folder structure, it can go into the files, read them, write them, use the one that it just wrote, run some code, and just keep going.
Yeah. So if you really want that industrious version of ChatGPT, you have to use Codex.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And that's one thing that's just kind of worth, like, we're doing a lot of comparison between, Claude Code and Codex, but a lot of people, they don't necessarily want to have multiple subscriptions, or they work at a company that might only pay for ChatGPT or access to ChatGPT. So, there is the comparison, but also it's just good to know what can you do with Codex if that's your only option.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead. So this was just having it review that image, and it did a pretty good job. Next, we'll move on to we're kind of just looking at like the overall capabilities in general. So we've seen reading and writing files. We've seen viewing images. We've seen web searches. One thing that is another really awesome thing, and where we continue to differentiate from the browser, is that you can run code. So of course you can write code, but it's also helpful to just be able to run code. And so for this example, we have an API already installed, but I had ChatGPT install it. So you can just basically imagine this is how you can have your LLM actually interface with the world and just basically do anything you can do with code, but in the CLI. So here I found an API that can take a YouTube video and then get the transcript. And normally, like if you asked GPT in the browser, like, hey, here's this video, give me the transcript, it wouldn't be able to do it. It doesn't have the tools. But here we have already given it the tool to be able to get those transcripts using an API. And so it can pull that in for us. So we're gonna say, go ahead and use this API to get the transcript for this video. This video, of course, is our Claude Code demo from last time. And then it will basically create it'll just put it into a new file for us. So what we see is it's going to go ahead and search our code base. It'll find that we have that API, and then it will run it for us. And so this is where you can really, over time, continue to add tools to ChatGPT so they can use them for all different kinds of things that you might want. Other examples are you could give it an API to connect to like your database in some way so that it could pull in data for you. Really, like any information that's outside of it now, there's probably an API that would let it pull that information in and then do things with it.
This is a really important point. I feel like I'm going to be changing a lot of my prescriptions about when people should be using ChatGPT to be saying, no, you should actually be using ChatGPT Codex, because if you want access to tools, if you want to make your LLM actually agentic, Codex is the way to do it. If you want to connect to your database, Codex is the way to do it. That's a really important point.
Yeah, exactly. So we see it running here. Search, it found the files, and now it's basically running the script. Okay, so as we did before, we'll go ahead and let this run, and while we do that, we can go ahead and do another instance of Codex here. Okay, so for this one, all right, so earlier what we saw that we were able to give it these interview transcripts and then have it summarize them. Let's say that we had meeting notes and we want them to be summarized. If we just say, hey, summarize this meeting note with action items and decisions, it will do that, but it will always do it a little bit differently every time. And so what you really want, if you're working somewhere, there's probably some sort of format that you want that's like consistent. So, when you send it out to people every time, it's not different. So in this is where we kind of start to see a little bit of divergence from Claude Code, is there are no commands. So you cannot add custom commands to Codex. So you can't say, in Claude Code, you can create a command that's like summarize meeting, and then you can just point it to those files. All that the commands in Claude Code really are, though, is they're just other files that have instructions. And so here we have already created a template for meeting note summary. And so, of course, this could be anything that you wanted. But here I'm saying that the template that I want is discussion points, action items, risk blockers, and next steps for next item, and then some instructions for the summarizer. So even though we can't actually have a new command, what we can do is we can say summarize the meeting notes from, and then we haven't actually covered this yet, but if you want to sort of target a specific folder or file, you just do the @ sign. So meeting notes. Okay, so we're adding the whole folder, and then we're saying using, and then what we have is this template is called meeting notes summary template.
This is
And
really
so what it
neat
will
how you
do is
can
it will,
reference folders and files. So if you had a PRD template, you could apply this to a PRD template, basically anything.
yeah, exactly. And we'll do a nice little deep dive into how to use this for PRDs as well. Okay, so we're gonna we said here's where those meetings are, those meeting notes, and then use this template. And what it will do is it will follow those instructions exactly. So this is how you can sort of really start to define that behavior over time for the LLM. And it's nice because let's say that you run this and then you get some feedback from your manager that your meeting notes are too long or the key decisions weren't clear enough, or you want to make sure that the date is like very specifically called out, then you can just edit this template and you can either run it again for those same meeting notes, or you can just have that going forward. And again, this is another thing that's just pretty hard to do in the browser. And this is also a nice way where, when you're on Twitter or you're on X and you see a really cool prompt that would, help you think through something, or, there's all those like mega prompts that people post, but you never know what to do with them. You could store them in here as part of your templates or prompts and then trigger them super easily so you actually have access.
This could be the best place to build your prompt library too.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if anyone has really built like a good, like open source product management prompt library. That might be a good project that you could pull into these and then use whenever you wanted.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
Today's episode is brought to you by the experimentation platform Chameleon. 9 out of 10 companies that see themselves as industry leaders and expect to grow this year say experimentation is critical to their business. But most companies still fail at it. Why? Because most experiments require too much developer involvement. Chameleon handles experimentation differently. It enables product and growth teams to create and test prototypes in minutes with prompt-based experimentation. You describe what you want, Chameleon builds a variation of your web page, lets you target a cohort of users, choose KPIs, and runs the experiment for you. Prompt-based experimentation makes what used to take days of developer time turn into minutes. Try prompt-based experimentation on your own web apps. Visit chameleon.com/prompt to join the waitlist. That's KAMELEOON.com/prompt. Today's episode is brought to you by Naya One. In tech buying, speed is survival. How fast you can get a product in front of customers decides if you will win. If it takes you 9 months to buy one piece of tech, you're dead in the water. Right now, financial services are under pressure to get AI live. But in a regulated industry, the roadblocks are real. Naya One changes that. Their air-gapped, cloud-agnostic sandbox lets you find, test, and validate new AI tools much faster, from months to weeks, from stuck to shipped. If you're ready to accelerate AI adoption, check out Naya One at nayaone.com/Aakash. That's NAYAONE.com/AAKASH. Today's episode is brought to you by the AIPM certification on Maven. Run by Migdad Jaffer, who is a product leader at OpenAI, this is not your typical course. It's 8 weeks of live, cohort-based learning with a leader at one of the top companies in tech. OpenAI just doesn't stop shipping, and this is your chance to learn how. Run along with product faculty and Mo Ali, the course has a 4.9 rating with 133 reviews. Former students come from companies like OpenAI, Shopify, Stripe, Google, and Meta. The best part? Your company can probably cover the cost. So if you want to get $500 off, use my code AAKASH25 and head to maven.com/product-faculty. That's maven.com/PRODUCT-FACULTY.
Okay, so we see that it's working. Let's go back to that first one with the YouTube transcripts. So
to review here, Codex can connect to APIs. So we have connected to is it the YouTube API here?
Yes, or it's not the YouTube API. It's one that someone else built called the YouTube transcript API, and it's using that.
Cool.
Okay, so save this transcript to data YouTube. So let's go into that data YouTube. I should be charging $999 for this Claude Code tutorial, and then where's this? Okay, and then we have that full entire transcript here. So it worked basically. So that's cool. This would be very hard information to get into, a file that you could then use, because now of course we could have it summarize this or do interesting things with it without us having to copy and paste it in or something.
Yeah, you literally can't get ChatGPT to go pull a YouTube transcript like this. Otherwise, it like struggles with the browser use and everything like that. So this is a way to connect it to things that you can find via APIs, which is very powerful.
Exactly. Cool. Okay, and then it created the summaries, so meeting notes summaries, so put them into meeting notes summaries, so meeting notes summaries, Okay, and then we see that we have all those meeting notes according to that sort of exact template that we gave it before.
Very cool. So it connected to APIs here. It used our template to create meeting notes. These are some crazy use cases compared to regular ChatGPT.
Yeah, and now what we'll do is we'll kind of take these things that we've used and we'll put them together in a pretty powerful way. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and launch Codex again, and let's go through a quick sort of tutorial on how you can really use. So far what we've seen is we've just been giving ChatGPT like basic, like, you know, things that we for sure know it can do. Just summarize this meeting transcript, use this code. But one thing that was really useful about you know, having it in this interface is that we can actually have it like have a conversation with ChatGPT before we actually create the document. So if you need to do some thinking, GPT can be a really good thinking partner where it can ask you questions about the PRD that you're trying to build before then actually creating it for you. Because if you just ask an AI to build a PRD, it will do it, but it won't be very good. And most of it, because most of the way that you write a good PRD is with good thinking, sort of good upfront thinking as a product manager, so that all of that thinking sort of is embedded in the document.
Yes, exactly. When your company gives you that template, they're actually asking you to think about it, not just prompt AI for it. AI will just make some weird assumptions.
Exactly. And here's where you can do like some cool stuff is you can have in your like in your folder basically company context. So here we have in our docs, we have business info. So this tells the AI like what does our company actually do? Especially if you work at like a startup or even a specific part of, you know, the company that you work for, you can say like, what are you actually trying to accomplish, so that when it's writing that PRD, it has so much more context than if you just say write this PRD without understanding kind of all the other stuff. And this really helps it sort of gives it the context for questions that ask you about how you can improve your PRD. So first what we'll do is just to make sure that it kind of understands its context is we will say, okay, read this doc for business info and give me a summary. And then next what we're going to do, and this is completely different than anything we covered in the Claude Code tutorial, is, and this is something I've been playing around with that has been pretty effective, is in these, so in our templates, we have something called Socratic questioning. So this is just one example of how when you find one of those like really interesting prompts online or something that you think would be helpful, how you can actually use it. So in this case, I saw one about Socratic questioning, which is basically the AI will ask you like really open-ended questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, but they are the types of questions that if you're in a meeting with your manager or, you know, some execs and they ask, how do you know that this is really the right problem to solve? Or why do you think we should do this when our competitor is doing this? It will kind of guide you through those types of questions, both to kind of help you think about them, you know, that's the most important thing, and then also think through those problems and then ultimately actually embed those in the PRD when it goes to write the PRD.
Love it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to say, please read the Socratic questioning prompt and then give me some questions about, and then in this case, we're going to go through an example where we're creating a feature for a voice chat with your to-do list. So that might be useful for, you know, someone who's on the field and they have a bunch of stuff that they have to mark off as they complete it, but it's hard for them to like get to a computer interface or something. So right now we see it, it's opening up that questioning template, it's reading it, and then it kind of understands the context from our company, from what we gave it before, and then it will ask us some questions. And of course, this is where when you started, you'd probably have like a lot more ideas for it. And one tip that I definitely have, and this is something that people talk about commonly, is with tools like Whisperflow, where you can just kind of talk and just explain your idea without having to worry about formatting at all, because it will all get accurately transcribed. And LLMs are really good at just taking brain dumps or, you know, any sort of amount of context and understanding what you're actually trying to communicate, and they can use it. So it's a really good way to just start your PRD, is just explain like the whole feature and what you're trying to accomplish, and then it will use that to ask you good questions.
And you can even just put a list of like things to remind yourself as you're speaking into Whisperflow, you know, the problem, the solution discovery you've done so far, other features that you've launched, and that can just really help you create this right context dump.
Yep. Just kind of stream of consciousness is sometimes a good way to go. Okay, so the mode that I have it in right now is it's asking like multiple choice questions. And one thing I'm going to do to just make this quicker, because the exact output here isn't too important. We're going to go to like a lower model just to keep it quick. But basically it'll say, okay, here's a question. So basically, so its first question here is asking us like, why do we think that this voice to-do list feature would be helpful? So it's saying, do we have quantitative, so do we have data for this? Is it qualitative? We've heard from user interviews. or is it strategic? We just feel like we need to have this feature. So we looked at our data from before, and one of them, we just saw that our user interviewers were pointing to this being a good feature. So we'll go B, and it will just ask us a few questions. And again, the exact answers here aren't that important, so I'm just going to go ahead and put them in. But it sort of shows the idea of how it can really ask you like pretty in-depth questions to really challenge your thinking. Okay,
I think
so
people
now
underrate the LLM as thought partner use case, but here, especially because we gave it the context, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually asking us like a lot of questions here. It's following up on a lot of those questions that we just asked. So it's saying, when is the best time to launch it? What has to work reliably for V1? How should we, and then it's also asking about some like the MVP scope. What should we do when we have only like really low confidence transcripts? Or what fields do we need to start with only for V1? Can it just be title and due date? Does it also need an assignee? So these are the types of things where, hopefully you're already thinking about them as a PM, but there's a lot that you have to manage, as a PM, and every product can be much more complex than you expect. So having this LLM like really challenge you on all these different aspects, both kind of to remind you and then give you some options to think through, makes it so that once you do present your work to your engineers or your designer or your manager, it's much more thought through.
Yep.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go ahead. I don't want to answer all these questions for this fictional product. So we'll kind of move on to the last step here. So we imagine we're in this world where it understands our business context. We've been talking to it, for like an hour, answering all these questions, and now we're ready to just have it actually write the PRD. So we can do a similar thing to what we did before, where we can say, hey, I have this PRD template I like. And then another cool thing that you can do is you can say, like, let's say you're working in a company where there are some like really killer PMs who write amazing PRDs. Maybe they're also using maybe they're also using Codex, but you've just seen them and they're great, and you want to model yours after theirs. You can also point to those existing versions and then have it sort of create another version for you. That, of course, is not copying any of the language, but just the style is something that you can pretty easily do with this. So this kind of last thing, just pulling it all together, is we're going to say, please review 3 PRDs from this folder, and then create the final PRD. So please use, and then we're going to go ahead and @PRD template.
So the ideal PRD structure: first, inform it of the context in the folder, have it review the template, have it do the Socratic methods with you, and then you have it review the example PRDs, and finally create it.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. And then let's go ahead and just put in this last thing in docs, example PRD. So let's say that let's say your manager, before they got promoted, they had like a really killer PRD that also makes a lot of sense for the feature that you're building. And so we'll say that maybe that's this mobile workflow editor. So please use this template and then this doc as inspiration to write our PRD based on everything we discussed above. And put this into a new .md file.
And it's crazy how much faster it is dictating.
Yeah. Every time I start typing, I'm like, oh. Also, I have like a weird weakness where I'm not a super slow typist, but whenever I'm screen sharing, I am just the worst, absolute worst typist anybody has ever seen. So that's like a thing that like people have commented on at work. Like, Carl, do you like know how to use a keyboard? So that's why I'm very extra grateful for voice dictation in these podcasts for sure.
I think the 16K views in 7 days begs to differ, but a lot of dictation did help there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. It's pretty fast at this point, and it's putting it into our whole format here. So this is a way that the output that you can get from a PRD, just going through this process versus really anything you can do in the browser, is just, it goes from being a sort of kind of their PRD that you're going to have to edit a lot to a really good PRD that like is almost right out of the box going to be like almost everything you want because you've done all that actual thinking with it. And then it's just embedding that versus it makes it and then you have to kind of think and respond. And I think that's like the classic thing where, does AI really speed you up if it creates something, but then you have to spend the same amount of time fixing it? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so
no,
definitely not.
PRD workflow.
Yes. Okay, so sometimes you always just have to ask like your AI, like, what did you do? Open. Okay, please move it there. Also, one thing, I didn't really proofread what I said before, so I said to call it new.md. So it did that instead of new space MD. Oh, but here it is. Okay, so let's just look at this. Okay, and now we have this very nice PRD. Customer problem, business impact, goals with our metrics, and these are all tied to the things that the company actually cares about from that folder we had before. Target users, like this is a really, really nice PRD.
A lot better than what you're going to get if you just say, write me a PRD and give it some context.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we are getting pretty close to the end of what you can do with Codex in the CLI. So we've kind of seen most of the stuff. We've seen it be able to search, read, write files, seen it be able to create new documents, seen it be able to be a thought partner, seen how you can store prompts and then use them. And so in some ways it's a bit nice because you don't have to there's no super complicated workflows. And we'll talk about Claude Code and how that compares in a second. But really it's just files on your computer, and then you can save prompts in those files, you can save templates in those files, and you just sort of reference those files when you need to use them. And so that's why, like we talked about already, there's no custom commands in Codex, but all a command really is, even in Claude Code, is just basically pointing to a markdown file. So there's some, it can feel a bit less fully featured, and there are some areas where it is less fully featured, but I actually think that there's some niceness to how they haven't overbuilt a bunch of these features that are just basically pointing it to files. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we already covered that there's no / commands. Another thing that Claude Code has that is pretty nice and does not exist in Codex is planning mode. So really quick, just as a reminder, when we're in Claude Code, this is sort of the opposite of the YOLO mode, is planning mode. So that's hey, do not do any, you literally can't make any changes to any files when it's in plan mode. And so what Claude Code will do is you'll have a conversation with it, and then it will basically tell you what the plan is, and you can modify the plan before it starts. And then it will actually kind of show you the checklist. And they're starting to do some very cool things with that feature, where if there are gaps in the plan or there's decisions that have to be made, it will give you multiple choice options for what, hey, how do you think we should handle this edge case? And then it says you could do this, or you can type your own thing. So that's pretty nice. But otherwise, this type of feature doesn't really exist in Codex, although it does in the sense of when we go to those approvals, so the / approvals command, so we started with auto, that was kind of where we started this podcast, and then we moved into YOLO mode, which is this full access, never ask for permissions. You can put it in read-only mode, and then that's just exactly what we were talking about, where it can't change files or start doing anything, because LLMs, they're built to serve, they just want to start doing stuff, so this stops them from doing that. But I would say it's not really it's not as fully featured as Claude Code. So if you need to do a plan and you don't want to start changing things, then you just tell it what you're trying to do, and it can't start coding, which is helpful. And so this is the closest that you can get with it right now.
Got it.
And then, okay, so the big thing, the very most important thing that Codex is missing that Claude Code has is agents. So when you do something in Claude Code, and you can ask it to spin up sub-agents, and what it does is it will basically create clones of itself with different tasks, and then it can parallelize work very powerfully. And Codex doesn't have anything like that sort of out of the box. And so for we saw kind of before, so what we're going to do is we'll use an example here where we say, hey, use that YouTube transcript API that we talked about from before. I want you to search for the best ways to use Codex CLI. I want you to get 3 videos. I want you to run them all in parallel and then create a summary document. If we told that to Claude Code, then kind of out of the box, it knows how to do it. There is a kind of hacky workaround that we can use to do that in Codex.
How do we do that in Codex?
So as we've seen, you can have Codex running multiple times. We can run it here and give it a task, and then we can go to another terminal and we can run it here and give it a task. What you can do is you can have Codex do that on its own. So it basically will make terminals that you can't see in the background and then give those tasks, and then they can run in parallel, and then it can get the outputs from all of them and put it back together. So functionally that actually works pretty well, and it is similar to Claude Code's agents, but it is definitely a workaround, and it's not sort of a first-class feature like it is in Claude Code.
So how do we do that?
Yeah, so you can actually basically, like with most stuff, you can just kind of tell it to do it. So we'll start a new chat here, and then we're going to give it that exact command that I just said. So we're going to say find these 3. So we're going to say I want you to find 3 recent videos for Codex CLI on YouTube, and then create summaries in parallel. Here's the approach. And so the first time you do this kind of approach, it will have to sort of like write the script for it, but then going forward, it can use that more easily. So search YouTube and give me 3 video URLs, then write a script that, runs them in the background, uses YOLO mode so you don't have to worry about permissions, gets a transcript, creates a summary, and then put them all back together. And so let's actually, this is a good one. Let's do it let's show the difference between Claude Code and Codex for this. So, okay, and then let me make sure that we're in the right mode. Okay, good. They're both in YOLO mode. So I'm going to change it a little bit for Claude Code because it doesn't need to do that. We'll just say, instead of writing the script, we'll just have it spin up 3 agents in parallel to create summaries of each video. Okay, so now we'll really see the difference between how these 2 approach this. For Codex, there's some things that it has to figure out, like I'll have to figure out exactly how to do this. Whereas we see Claude Code just starts working. So first it's searching on YouTube to try to find those videos that we can use for the API. So it already found, actually, yeah, it'll keep thinking. So it did a search, didn't find anything, but it'll keep thinking. And yeah, it's interesting. Claude Code can be a bit inconsistent. Here we actually saw it. There aren't really, okay, so Claude Code got confused. It couldn't actually find those videos. Whereas it looks like Codex actually already found those videos. So I'm not sure if it's because Claude Code has like some sort of limitation for searching YouTube. I think that's definitely possible. There's a lot of websites these days that are kind of trying to block agents from getting into them because of like all the data extraction. But let's see when we run this again if it finds them. Okay, so now with Codex, we saw that it did successfully find 3 videos. And now it is creating that script to run itself in parallel. And so it's planning that. And then, okay, great. So this time, Claude Code did find it. So yeah, sometimes that's one thing with just working with LLMs in general is they're never deterministic, which is the beauty of them and kind of the pain of them as well.
Yep. And the fun of live demos.
Yeah, and the fun of live demos. Some of this stuff, like I have kind of on the rails, and then some stuff is like, okay, like I'll have tested it on my own before, but you never know exactly what will happen when you actually run it. Okay, so I actually would say that so far, I think Codex is going to ultimately be slower, but it's doing a better job. It found like more relevant videos where we see Claude Code is kind of starting to do some like crazy stuff. Like it has found, well, our original prompt was also to look at Codex CLI, and then what we see here is it's kind of is like going way off the rails, where it's like pulling in Medium articles. It's like no longer on YouTube. It found a Claude Code tutorial for building a YouTube research agent, which is like obviously way off what we want. I think what it's doing is it's looking at these websites and it's trying to find the YouTube videos, and it's trying to find 3. So it did eventually get there. It didn't go like completely off the rails, but it definitely took it a lot longer than I would have expected to find them.
Yeah. But it's cool also at the same time that it did like go through the process of, oh, this isn't going to work for me. Let me go find something else.
Yeah, definitely. There's that saying that you can feel the AGI. I think it's some of that stuff where it navigates its own problems that you kind of start to feel the AGI. I think for me, like a big one was I was working with Claude Code the other day, and it committed its work before it started, and then it tried to do something, and it realized like what it did wrong. And then it went back to that commit and just erased its work. But it's like, okay, let me go back and do it the right way. And then the second time through, it got it right. So these tools are getting pretty smart. They're doing some like sort of surprisingly human behaviors in some ways. Because that's exactly how, if you're working with this tool, you're like, oh, okay, like we were doing it wrong, but we figured it out. Let's go ahead and go back and try it again the right way. They're starting to do that on their own. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I think Claude Code had a slow start, but it now started the tasks to run the YouTube transcripts, and all 3 agents have compiled their summaries in parallel. Now let me combine them into one doc. So I think Claude Code at the end of the day is going to win this agent race, which makes sense because it's so much more sort of baked in first class. Mm-hmm. And then while this is happening, kind of the last good thing to talk about in comparing these is So this is just agents, where it's sort of like a sub instance of the main thing that it can give its own rules to. But there are actual dedicated sub agents, which we saw in Claude Code, where you can sort of define like how it works and what tools it has, like a executive reviewer or a design reviewer or an engineer. That exists and is pretty first class in Claude Code, but there's really no version of that in Codex. I think the closest you could get is you could make a file like everything else that sort of defines how it works. But in Claude Code, like you can give them specific tools and just much more configuration. So I wouldn't be very surprised if we saw something like that coming out of OpenAI for Codex soon. But as of right now, there's just no parallel.
So Claude, in general, Claude Code is more agentic.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so Claude Code is just about done here. It looks like it did finish. Okay, so Claude Code 1, but Codex is not too far behind. It's now at the step of, it has all the transcripts and the summaries, and now it's putting them all back together. So that is basically everything to cover in terms of like main PM tasks for these two tools. Okay, Codex. Honestly, it was pretty close race overall, despite the completely different approaches. So I would say I wouldn't be too surprised if Codex, in general, Claude Code just kind of like leading the whole CLI interface. I think they were the first ones to really come up with the idea of trying it. And so, at this point, they are pretty far ahead and other teams are playing catch up. But I wouldn't be that surprised if once OpenAI sort of gets to these sub-agents, if it could have probably done this task faster than Claude Code.
Mm-hmm. And which one was more quality?
Yeah, let's look. Okay, so this one, so Codex, the Claude Code one is in YouTube Code, data. Okay, so this is Claude Code. Okay, so it's kind of showing each video, step-by-step highlights, key takeaways, video 2, video 3.
Pretty good, kind of verbose.
Yeah, they're pretty verbose. Let's see how this compares to what Codex did. So yeah, pretty verbose. I'd imagine that these are probably pretty good summaries. It's really calling out like some very specific stuff, the reverse DeepSeek moment. So it looks quality. I don't think we want to read through all of them right now, but let's just look at like high level how they look. Providing document location. Okay, final report, output. Okay, here we go. And then here is the Codex one. Open the preview here. Okay, so we definitely see like a totally different style, right? Like with the Claude Code one was like sort of broke it up into sections and then gave bullet points for each one and then kind of gave like a summary of everything at the end. Whereas if this Codex one, it looks like it is
It's got some formatting error.
Yeah, some weird formatting.
We could probably ask.
Not very good. Yeah, I think that the Codex one, it obviously, of course, chose different videos.
It's got a lot of stuff like get instant access to all premium courses and stuff. It doesn't seem like it did a good job of actually.
Yeah, this doesn't look good at all. So I think there may have been something that got messed up in those, like, the execution of the subagents. So I think for right now, parallelizing tasks in the same way that you can do in Claude Code, just really not that great in Codex. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one thing though, and this is kind of where we'll transition to the next kind of like last thing here, is we've been a bit unfair to Codex so far because we are comparing on sort of classic, PM document-based tasks. And overall, I would say that Claude Code's probably a bit faster. It has a little bit more features that are really first class. But what we haven't talked about and what Codex is really actually built for is coding. And so for this last part, let's go ahead and just kind of cover some of the main things that you can do with Codex. So the really, really great thing about Codex is that it is, especially if we use, and we're going to switch over to the GPT-5 Codex model, it is really good at doing like much more complicated features in ways that Claude Code or really no other coding agent has achieved yet. And we'll kind of talk about how can you take advantage of this sort of super big brain that will do an incredible amount of work, but make sure that that work is actually quality. And so what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and, so we're kind of transitioning from classic PM tasks into prototyping. And I will give an example of something that I have built. So we're going to go ahead and move out of this repo. So that kind of covers everything we had for that. And we're going to go ahead and open a new project here. Okay, so this is a thing that I've been working on. It is not related to the task flow at all. This is something different. So it's called the TikTok recipe bot, and I will show how it works. So here's the prototype that I built, and we'll use it to kind of give some examples here. But basically, right now, so let's say you are on TikTok and you find one of these really good looking videos of something that you want to make. Then if you have this recipe, then they can be really frustrating to actually create, because you look at them and they sort of show the steps, but they don't like ever really give you the actual recipe. Or, okay, this person, kind of classic engagement tactic, right? Comment recipe and I'll DM it to you. I think we're all familiar with that tactic, but it's like, how do you actually make this recipe? And so this is something I built for my girlfriend, where she goes to actually make them, and then they're very frustrating to make. And so what this does is you can give it a TikTok video and it'll extract the recipe. So what's happening here in the back end is it is downloading the video using, there's like APIs that already exist for that. And then it is giving it to Gemini. And Gemini, I think right now, is the only model that can consume video, which is actually pretty awesome. So you can give it a video and it will actually watch it and understand the sound and everything that's happening. And it also grabs the caption in case there's instructions there. And then it formats it into like this really nice recipe.
Wow.
And so this was something that I did build with Codex, and I learned a couple of very important things about how you can use these coding agents to do much bigger amounts of work at once. Oh, and then you can also download the PDF. So I'm pretty happy with this feature. I feel like it turned out really well.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about sort of coding with AI from it. And so the most frustrating thing about when you're using these agents to code, especially if you try to have them one shot, where just you give it something and then it actually gets the output in a way that you actually want, it can be very frustrating, because you tell it to do something and then it'll either get completely messed up somewhere in there, and then pretty much no matter what, they will say that they did it right. They will tell you, oh, I completed the work, the feature works perfectly, and then you go to test it and it looks bad and it doesn't perform well, or it does, usually like it might not even work at all, or the features completely don't work. And so what we'll kind of cover here is how can you create like really, really good specs up front, so that when AI does go to do the work, it's much higher quality. So there's kind of two aspects to it. One is the design. So one thing that sort of comes up a lot is that AI is like, it kind of can do UI, but it will never be like that good or that consistent. So we'll cover how can you make your designs of like what the AI actually builds look good, and then how can you actually have it test itself. And that is one thing that I think really starts turning a vibe coder or a product management builder or a full stack PM from just someone who's building like these prototypes and they're pretty hacky, to someone who's like actually doing some like real vibe engineering. And that's what we'll cover here. So let's start with the design stuff. So I have a couple slides here. Okay, so really what you want in order for AI to be able to design stuff well is you need a design system. So if I feel like most product managers are very familiar with how the concept of a design system. So you're at your company and you want to build a new feature. When your designer is going into Figma and they are creating the new designs for that thing, they are probably not completely starting from scratch, right? Like they're not going into Figma and then drawing a new rectangle and then rounding the corners and then figuring out what color they should use by like using the eyedropper tool. All of this stuff is already defined. Like they have some sort of component library. And so what you want when you're designing with AI is you basically want to give it the exact same types of things that a designer at your company has. So you have variables that it can use for those design decisions. So like it already knows what the colors are and like how sort of the spacing and different things like that work. You want to have a component library. And then what we're going to look at here and I'll demo is the best way to sort of store these things. And a lot of PMs might actually, like their engineers are probably using it at their company. It's called Storybook. And then you can combine all of that into this component registry. And so when the AI goes to build something, it already knows like what are all the variables that it can play with, what are the components that it has access to. You can see those in Storybook so that you can actually see them before the AI goes to build anything, which is exactly how things are built regularly, right? Your designer creates the Figmas and then you review them in your team meetings, and then you sort of agree on what you're going to build and how it's going to look before the engineer ever like actually starts building it. And so that's kind of the mindset shift. If you really want to move from just being a vibe coder to really doing some vibe engineering, is you're probably already familiar with the process because of how you're doing it at your own company.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so first let me just show Storybook. So what this is, and if you have like your existing thing that you've already built, then you can just ask your AI to like add Storybook. But what we're gonna do here is so npm run Storybook. So I already have it set up, but when I set it up with Codex, GPT-5 Codex, it just literally like one-shotted it. So this is like a very standard thing in like the web development world. So AI is quite good at it. Okay, so what it's doing here is it's kind of running like almost like a secondary website for just showing these components. And so if we look again at what this extractor looked like, we have this section where you put the URL. We have this section that actually shows the recipe, and then we have this section for the different sort of like creators that are already good. So each of these things is a component, and if we go into our component library, what we see is we already have these like created here, so that when the AI goes to build something, it already kind of knows what the pieces are, and it even knows like what are the different variations of those components. And similar for the recipe display, we already have it built here. And this just gets rid of so many frustrations of vibe coders, because normally you say, hey, I want it to look like this, and then it will build it, and then I'll be like, okay, now can you actually make the title pink so that it goes better with the rest of the format? But let's say I was on my website, I would have to like rerun, it would make the change, and then I have to rerun this and like let the LLM extract it, and then I'll see it, and it's like the wrong shade of pink or something. But what's nice is when you have this component library, you can make edits to how things are going to look without having to kind of worry about any of the actual, like back-end code, and you can see it live right here. So
Amazing.
like as an example, we can show this. So this component is called recipe display. So what we can do is we can tell the AI, so we'll use Codex here. Okay, and then I think, so please update. And this is actually a good one where before we run this, I'm gonna go ahead and this is an example where sometimes when you're doing something completely new, you would wanna actually use that planning mode that we talked about, just because sometimes you like wanna make sure it knows what it's supposed to do and where it is in the code base before you let it try. I just know because I ran this sort of like practice part of the demo earlier, and it did some wrong stuff. But when you ask it to find it first, so please update the color of the title in recipe display component to be pink. Please locate the code first. Your plan. This should be reflected in Storybook when I see it. Okay, so now Codex is going to go in here and it's going to, last thing. We still have it on the weaker model from earlier. So let's go ahead and turn on Codex now. So we're going to put on Codex in medium, and then we'll run that same command. So now is the first time for this demo that we're having it actually use the version of itself that is built for code.
And the main differences here tends to be the post trading is really optimized for code and large tasks.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of people they really like it because it is so optimized for code. Oh, here we go. So this is the first time we've actually seen it like sort of display its checklist. But if you and I wonder if it's because we're in Codex mode. I'm actually not sure, but because we didn't see it the rest of this whole demo. But this is where it actually like shows its plan, which is a very Claude Code like feature. Okay, so it said it found the recipe display component. Okay, great. Yeah, this is exactly what we wanted to do. So it found like basically where that color is defined as gray, and then we're going to turn it to pink. Okay, so now we trust it. We believe that it kind of is doing the right thing. So we're going to go ahead and go back to YOLO mode. And then, okay, please make only that change. And now we'll go ahead and do it. So now a natural question that you might ask is like, how do you get components into your library? So first, oh great, okay, so now we're back here and we can see the design was changed to this pink color without us having to like run it in the actual code. So now next time when we run this, it will be pink. So we can trust that that's happening. And that is just a really good way to iterate on designs quickly without having to like worry about generating them each time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the question might be like, how did I get this stuff in here? So there's a couple different approaches. One is you can just tell the AI like, hey, I need a component for this, put it in Storybook, and then you'll see it in here and you can like iterate on it. But most of the time, for most of the things that people are building, you're not really reinventing the wheel. And like if you're building something more complicated, like let's say you need a calendar UI in your product, that can be a very complicated feature. Like if you wanted something where you can select a range of dates and you want like, keyboard to work and you want it to be accessible, all of that stuff can be like just unnecessarily difficult to build because there are already really nice component libraries that exist. So the most common one these days is this ShadCN. That guy is also really funny on X. And he's built, and I don't know if he has a team or exactly what, but he has this amazing website where there are all of these different components that are just pre-built for all different kinds of things. So the calendar I just mentioned, instead of building one on your own with AI, you can just use these sort of like pre-built components that are built like in the exact way that AI wants, where it's called being headless. So it kind of gives you the structure of it, but all of the like actual design elements, you can grab this and then change all the design elements to be what works for your product or what colors you use rather than these colors. But all of the logic and all of like the difficult things you kind of get for free if you add these to your component library.
Very cool. So you're basically like defining these components using this system built on top of React that allows you to interface with AI better and have it adopt your design system.
Yep, exactly. And so when it goes to build something and you say, hey, we want to add a calendar, use this component, that both gives it like enough direction for like how to use an existing thing, and it gives it like enough flexibility so that it works for your specific code. And so here's just this example where there's all these different variants of it. There's, this range a range calculator, month year selector if you want it like that, like all these different versions that would make sense for your product. You don't really need to reinvent them. There's already like these really nice looking places you can get them. And so as an example, and then once you find one that you like, you can either just copy and paste the URL right into the LLM and it knows how to do it. Or you can run your own command that will add it, but this just will like instantly add it to your own. For what the feature that we're going to demo here in a second, I just pulled in this badge one just to get like a bunch of variations of the badge. And then what we see here is we have a bunch of this variation of the badge for these tags that we're going to add to recipes. And that was like literally like 1 minute of work.
Wow.
Okay, so that is how you can, you build out your design system, and then only when you need something new, then you build it. And that's kind of like the philosophy, is that you try to build things with the components that you have and then use ShadCN. I wonder if I'm saying it right. I bet there's another way to say it. Maybe people can let us know in the comments. And install them as you need them, add the Storybook, and then your system just kind of grows over time. And then you can trust your AI to like use those components as it's building things, and you can kind of guarantee that they'll actually look pretty nice. Okay, so that's how you get a nice design system. And then the last thing that we're going to cover today is sort of how can you get AI to test its own code. And it's very interesting because it's kind of similar to, for the design process, the way it works is you just kind of emulate like the existing design process in companies that we're already familiar with and works really well. You do something similar for coding. And so what this is it's called test-driven development. And this is really where you start moving from just being a vibe coder who doesn't understand what's going on to being a vibe engineer who's really understanding what's happening and building like actually really quality products. And so the main sort of philosophy behind test-driven development is this, it's this RGR flow. And so the way this works is red means that before you even write your feature, then before you build your feature at all, you write tests for that feature that you know are going to fail because the feature doesn't exist at all yet. And so what we're going to do as an example is for this product, what we'll do, or for this feature, right now we don't calculate macros. So we'll build something that actually adds like protein, calories, carbs, and fat to the recipe so that when you see it, you can get that. And so as an example of some of the tests that you would write that would fail for that is you would say, okay, when we use the API to get calories back, that should fail. And then basically what that does is it helps the AI be honest about how it's starting. Because it's saying like, we wrote these tests that are failing, and then it has to make those failing tests pass. And that is like really critical because it goes from one thing that AI will do and loves to do is it just wants to make progress and it wants to make you happy so badly that sometimes it will just do crazy stuff when it's writing tests. Like there's a bunch of examples where people have shown it'll just, try to make a test work and then it won't be able to get it to work and it will just set the value to true so that it passes.
Oh my gosh, devious.
Yeah, LLMs can be very devious. You have to keep them honest because they are so competent in so many ways, but also they really just they want to make progress. And so doing it this way, where you have a test that fails and then it also has to pass, then like the option of just saying that you can set this variable to be true to make it pass, that would never work because we had like good tests to start out with. And so that's the red green element. That's the most important element. But then what Codex is really good at is this like kind of last step, which is called refactor. So basically, it's written code that failed, and then now it is actually working. And now you can kind of have the AI take one more pass at the code and say, okay, now that you've built it and it's working, would there be a way that you could build it better? And this is really nice because you already have the passing tests. It will like try to change some things that would make the code simpler or easier to read or more performant. And then it'll make sure that they still pass. And if they don't pass, it can always fall back to what it already had. And so this is what real engineers do, this exact process of test-driven development. And if you can have AI do the same thing, then you'll just end up where it'll say that a feature is done and you can actually believe that it made the feature work.
Amazing. So this is how you really get the strength of Codex, which is staying on the rails, to graduate you into actually shipping a medium-sized feature as a PM potentially.
Yes. And that is also why this is really important with Codex specifically, because as awesome as Codex is as a model, it's really slow. Like we kind of saw maybe some speed differences between GPT-5, not Codex, and Sonnet 4.5 when we use Codex and Claude Code right next to each other. Codex, like GPT-5 Codex, it is pretty slow. So the more you can set it up successfully earlier on, then like you don't have to have the pain of like, oh, it like did this small mistake and now I have to restart it or ask it something else, because it is pretty slow. This makes it so that you can just give it this really good spec, open up another terminal in Codex or go have lunch, and then when you come back and it says it's done, you can trust that it like actually is done.
Very nice.
So, and then just kind of the final thing. So when you're figuring out how to write these tests, it's very helpful to have some intuition around like how does your product work? And this is where you really do have to understand your product. You can ask the AI to write tests, and AI is very good at writing tests, but it's still helpful to like understand the concept. So basically, you're just saying like, okay, in the happy path, if we have chicken Alfredo, then it ends up returning the calories and the protein. So like basically in the happy path, we give it the ingredients, it puts them all together, and we get them correctly. But what are the things that could go wrong? So one thing is that you get an empty recipe. We try to do the extraction and then we get no recipe. So what is the system going to do in that case? Let's say we have all the data, but we're just missing like one piece of data. Let's say we get invalid data. So for example, what you'd probably want to have happen is if we ran this and then it didn't get fiber, we would just either want it to say NA or we would want to just not display it, but we wouldn't want it to like halt the whole flow. And so this is where, if you think about that stuff up front and you kind of imagine that you're a QA engineer, then you're just actually defining all that behavior so that it can write the test to make sure that like what ends up happening is exactly what you want. Yeah, so basically it's just helping you think through all those edge cases. And there can be a lot. Like there can be things that, if you're just vibe coding and especially if you're newer to like development, then you just won't think about. Like what if you, for example, like we use Gemini to grab these videos and extract them. What if it just doesn't work? Like what if it doesn't get anything back or the API fails? Then you probably want some kind of like retry logic, and that's where there's like a lot of these things that real production grade products have, that if you're just vibe coding, you're probably missing them. Like you're probably missing retries, you're probably missing a bunch of edge cases. Even if you think it's a really simple feature, they're usually, every PM I'm sure knows this in their core, they're usually a lot more complicated than they seem. And so going through this process both kind of builds your engineering skills and helps you build much higher quality products.
And don't we always feel bad when we give the PRD, but we didn't think of all these edge cases? I think this is the benefit of actually building some of it yourself. It helps you see those edge cases and when you deliver something like this to the engineers, it's so much closer for them to take it to production, even if they do need to make some significant changes to the code or code quality or things like that. This is giving them a much more detailed spec.
Yes. And I think you had a tweet about this once, or maybe you quote tweeted like Pat the PM or something. But this stuff, like going through this as a product manager, just gives you so much both more appreciation for what engineers do and just like an actual understanding. Like I've always felt like I was a pretty technical PM and I could work with engineers pretty successfully. And I have an engineering background, not in computer science. So I felt like I understood this stuff, but there is a lot more to it that like, if you understand it, you have more appreciation for what engineers are doing. And it just hands down makes you a much better PM because you are understanding these technical concepts for, ultimately we are building software. So it might not be the most important thing, but having like some intuition around how this stuff works is really, really helpful as a product manager.
So go beyond this podcast, pause for a second, and build one of these yourself so you really develop that intuition. Because if you do it once, you'll remember it forever, versus where you're at now, where you've just watched us or listened to us, you'll forget after a few weeks.
Yeah, 100%. And you can always just fork an existing product and then have the AI explain it to you. Codex is really good at that as well. And then try to make some small changes, and you'll make some mistakes. And I've talked a lot about some of the frustrations that you can experience with coding with AI, and you will hit up against those. But it's like, as you do it, you just get better and better until you're like really becoming like kind of like a really legitimately technical person. Okay, so this kind of final thing here, for this example feature, what we're adding is it parses those. We already had, the way it worked before is it would already grab the ingredients. So now it'll just use the USDA API to get calories, divide by servings, and then display in the preview. And so what you end up with is you end up with this kind of like two things. One is these design rules from what we were talking about before, which is basically like you're somewhere in your code, you're defining somewhere in your app, you're defining like what are the design systems for this tool. So like, here's the component library, here's how they're installed. And all of this was written by AI, but it's helpful to just have so that when you want to add a new component, you can say like, use these design rules as you add it to our thing so that it knows like all the variables. And then the other thing, and what we're going to do here is I really wanted to demo this feature live, but when I had Codex run it, it took 30 minutes. So I don't think we want to sit here for 30 minutes and watch it. So I already built this feature, but what I'll show you is the implementation spec that I gave it before we started. So let's go ahead and, okay, I'm going to do something bad here, but I'm going to use Claude because it's a bit faster. What are the branches? Okay, again, it's funny. I've given it the same command and it did know that the macro calculator branch was the one I was talking about, but sometimes not. Switch over to macro calculator. Sometimes whisper flow is kind of cool. It will, like, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it does have some understanding of where you are on your computer. And so what happened there was I said switch over to macro calculator, but it knew that we were in this file. And so it added a similar sounding file because they're like, what I said didn't make sense. So that was a mistake, but it's kind of interesting to see how that worked. Okay, apparently, just go ahead and switch to that branch. Okay, so now we are in the right folder. And so the implementation spec that I gave to this thing, at some point we committed a implementation doc, or can you try to find the implementation doc that we had in this project? And then this will be the last thing we look at.
Cool.
So now kind of putting all of this together, we have our design system and we have this testing philosophy. And so when I actually had Codex build this feature, I use a just super in-depth spec like this one, where if we look at it here, it just has like everything. It shows the architecture, the data flow, the API that we're going to use, all the different kind of like responses that we could get, implementation details, and it really is like laying out the testing and exactly how each of these are expected to work. So when I gave this to Codex, it was pretty awesome because it would just implement it and then run tests, and then the test would fail, and then it would run again, and then I gave it like a URL to test with, and it would run that, and it would be able to see like exactly what it was supposed to get, and like when it wouldn't get that, it would run it again. And so it took about 35 minutes. But I didn't have to touch it at all once it started. And it literally, like, for one of the first times, because I feel like this is the dream of this sort of, like, agentic coding, is that you can just give it, like, a medium-sized feature and it can just build it. That has not been the case. But this was the first time when I was building this feature that I actually saw it. And so if we want to just kind of see what this looks like, kind of round this out here. Okay, so we will give it a video again. Maybe we can use the same one we used before. And again, the other thing that I will call out is we had our design system with those badges for those different sort of information that we can get back. So we'll see if those were implemented correctly as well. Ta-da! So what it did is, and that was a relatively complicated feature because it had to, get these ingredients, run them each by the USDA API, get them back, calculate the totals, and then divide by the number of servings, and then display them with that new thing that we had in our design system. And we see it worked. Like it was literally able to get all those macros and then put them in here. And so this is,
cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And that's the type of feature where, normally if I was just like coding it in a normal way without trying to like have this really super good doc to start out with, you test it piece by piece and you're really in the loop. Whereas this way, you're very in the loop at the beginning and you're making sure that spec is good. And as your engineering skills improve, and mine are still improving as well, then you get to the point where you can actually have it sort of do these things much more powerfully. And that's why like even the nature of like most engineering work is really starting to change for engineers who have started to pick this stuff up, where now you can spend a lot of time up front on the architecture and the implementation details and the documentation. And then you can imagine, we had this feature running, but what if there was another feature I wanted to be building and another feature I wanted to have be building, where it's this new kind of way of working where you do a lot of upfront thinking and planning, and then you can just have all these agents working in parallel. And I think we're only starting to see the beginning of what that's really going to look like. But with agents like Codex, that reality is coming pretty fast.
Amazing. If we had to summarize, what are the top use cases for PMs of Codex?
Yeah, so I would say the top use cases for PMs of Codex, one is if you just only have access to ChatGPT from your company or something, then it's a very good tool for all the things that we covered today, which are you can use it to basically do anything sort of like that you would normally think about for an LLM. So the top use cases are you can use it to get summaries of any document. You can use it to do analysis across a bunch of different documents. You can use it as a thought partner for any sort of thing that you want to work through it, to think through a problem before you actually present it to anyone. LLMs can be really good at challenging your thinking. And just any type of thing where you are working on something where you need to be able to pull in information from anywhere else, you can use Codex to do that for you and then keep it all in one integrated environment where you can do all of those things. So really like documentation, anything related to documentation is a really good use case for product managers. And for product managers that want to do prototyping, as long as you follow these steps and you're really willing to put in that work up front, it can be one of the best ways to prototype that exists right now in 2025.
Amazing. And then there are all sorts of other use cases that are just valuable for you as a person, I think, to use Codex. Building presentations, automatically creating change logs, working with audio files, extracting image files, changing the format on a video file, cleaning up messy invoices, clearing space on your computer, basically anything you want an LM to do on your computer when it comes to working with files, where you'd have to go and search it on Google and install something as an app before. Now you can just have Codex do it.
Yeah. And I'm so surprised because I really started using Claude Code, so like anything in the CLI for the first time. Like I had used it before our podcast, but as we were kind of, as I realized we were going to be doing it for like the month before, I really started using it for like just more and more stuff. And now I almost just live in the terminal, which is crazy. And I never would have thought, because I'm not an engineer, but now it's just so useful that most of my like working stuff that I do on my computer, I actually just start in the terminal.
That could be you too, guys. If you want to learn more, check out Carl at Carl the PM on Instagram. Love his meme page. It's literally one of the funniest things I wake up to every day. Check out his newsletter, The Full Stack PM. If you want to become a full stack PM, follow him on LinkedIn or X. He's everywhere. And we'll probably have to have him back for another podcast as well. So let us know what we should have him back for. Carl, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I hope that everyone watching learned a lot too.
Bye, guys.
So if you want to learn more about how to shift to this way of working, check out our full conversation on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And if you want the actual documents that we showed, the tools and frameworks and public links, be sure to check out my newsletter post with all of the details. Finally, thank you so much for watching. It would really mean a lot if you could make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, following on Apple or Spotify podcasts, and leave us a review on those platforms. That really helps grow the podcast and support our work so that we can do bigger and better productions. I'll see you in the next one.